Hello, everybody. My name is Benny, and welcome to The Fool's Apprentice. And today we have a guest for my tarot chat. Hello.
Hello.
Will you introduce yourself to include any websites, any tarot channels you have?
Yeah. So I'm Tom Benjamin. I'm a tarot reader and teacher, and my websites are tombenjamintarot.com. And then on YouTube, lots of videos and tutorials there. You can find me by searching Tom Benjamin or at The Fool's Journal, which is the name of my blog. And on Instagram, I'm at Tom Benjamin Tarot.
Great. I'm so glad that you said yes, because there are not many men on tarot tubes. So
Mm.
the fact that you came on, because I have actually had some people mention, why don't you have more men? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'd love to have more men. They're just not there. Um, so one of the things that I'm always interested in when it comes to tarot readers is how they got introduced to tarot.
Mm.
And so how did that happen for you?
Yeah. So I was like, backstory is grew up super Catholic, very like, religious, until that all crashed and burned at like 17. Um, and that's relevant because I was in a production of Godspell. I used to be an actor, and we were like at some chain restaurant after the show, and like cedar plank salmon and french fries, right? And like someone brought out a tarot deck, and I was sort of riveted by it because I'd never seen one in person, and in Catholicism that's taboo.
Yeah.
You don't mess with that stuff, big time. Even though the Bible is riddled with divination, right? Um, and I couldn't. So they asked, he said, "Do you want a reading?" And I said, "No, I don't believe in that." And he's like, "How can you not believe in it? It's right here." Um, and but I couldn't stop thinking about it, and so I was probably about like 19 or 20, I think 19, and I remember like walking to the little like used bookstore. We had this like in my hometown is an old mill town, all dead mills, that are filled with like or were filled with shoppings, and so there was this like discount bookstore, and I grabbed a book on tarot and I like shoved it in with all the other things I was getting and hid it, you know what I mean? And got home and started like, paging through the book because I just wanted to know about, like I just wanted to know about it. I didn't want to do it. I just wanted to know about it. Which is something I tell myself all the time before I'm about to like deep dive into something life changing. Um, and there were no pictures of the cards in the book.
Oh,
It was like there was just a blank square where you were supposed to lay your card.
I
And so
think you showed that in the video. Is it the big black one? I think it was the
yes,
tarot workbook, and that was it.
yes,
Okay.
that's exactly it. And so I'm like, oh well, I guess I need to buy a deck because I want to see the cards. So that was the beginning, and then I quickly sort of downward, or well, I would say upward spiraled with it, and was buying decks and books like crazy after that.
And what deck did you end up buying?
It
Like,
was the Yeah, it was the purple and gold original Rider-Waite tarot pack, it was called, which is notoriously sort of the ugliest one that US came to.
it's like gold folding foil.
Yeah, on the box.
Oh yeah,
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 and it's the blue, like pale blue lilies and roses back. I have a
yeah.
soft spot for it because it was my first deck, but I understand why people don't love it.
Okay.
Yeah,
And how did you end up? Because I remember that video you mentioned that book was like over your head at the
yeah,
time.
big time.
So how did you end up starting to learn the tarot? Since you really did, it doesn't sound like you had anybody in your life that,
No,
yeah,
no one. There was no this back then either.
yeah.
The American Tarot Association existed, and there was still a little bit of like online social that you could connect there, but it wasn't anywhere near like what it is today. I started buying books, hiding them from my family. The first one was there was this. I don't know if it's still around, but it was like tarot for dummies, but it was like there was this series called the Everything book, and like everything astrology, everything pet care, and I found everything tarot. And that was the first one, and then Rachel Pollack kind of followed quickly after 78 Degrees of Wisdom, and then
Oh my gosh,
um,
in that book,
yeah.
when I first read it, I'm like, it was probably like your first book. That was over my head. I'm like,
Yeah, I wasn't ready for it, but I think I was. Rachel was such a good writer and such like a storyteller that I wanted to live in that world, even though I didn't know what the hell she was talking about. The Everything Tarot book actually was probably the most formative of the ones I read. But then what I quickly did was, after reading all those things, was I got a notebook, it was like a steno sized notebook, but it was really fat. And I made like a page for each card, and I sort of summarized. And so I went from working with the books to working with that notebook. And then over time, probably faster than I should have, I kind of memorized it and started working with it. And then I think pretty quickly leapt into the free reading networks. Sorry.
Well, that's interesting. What do you mean by you memorize the cards too early?
Mm. I think that's something a lot. This is something I do, and I think a lot of young people do it, and maybe even a lot of not young people do it, where like I become interested in something and I want to go from like 0 to expert in
Yeah,
2.5
definitely.
seconds. Yeah. And the thing about tarot or divination isn't just that you have to memorize the cards. You have to understand what that experience is in the world around you. And at like 19 or 20, you don't have as much as experience as you think you do. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I should have lived as a student. And this is something I did in theater. It's something I did with tarot, something I try to do less of the older I get. But I had to be a pro right away. You know what I mean? And I didn't enjoy the learning.
Oh,
Today, yeah. Today I say I never stopped, because that's now how I feel about it, right? But that back then it was, no, I have to be Rachel Pollack or I'm not worth anything, right?
that's hilarious. Yeah, I've never thought about it that way. I also, when I first started, I wanted to know it all. But I've kind of like loosened up a bit.
Uh-huh.
I'm still learning, like, I don't even know all the core cards. I have some cards that I know my basic understanding is the association to the element,
Yeah,
and where they are like adolescent, young adult, so forth
sure.
and so on. Um, so that's one thing I've noticed on your YouTube channel is that lots of writing, lots of notes. You share a lot of information on your channel and helping others. So you're like a student, or a professor
Hmm.
and teaching. How long did it take you before you started feeling like really confident with the
Ooh.
gym?
It took me a long time, I'm not gonna lie. I started reading when I was very young, and then I went through cycles of doing it a lot and doing it less, but it was sort of always in my life throughout like the early part of my 20s. And then I think I stopped believing in it for a minute. I got a little burned out, and I went away for a while. I don't it's not as long as I think it was. Like, it felt like a long time, but I sort of put all the decks in the closet and I put all the books on the shelf, and I just didn't think about it for about a year or two. And
It's a long time.
it is a long time, but that happens to me, or it used to, where something I loved really passionately, I would put down for a while, and then when I came back to it, I had like a different, deeper relationship to it, and that's what happened for me, and then that set me on the journey. That was around the time where I started my YouTube channel. I think it was maybe a year or two after I came back to it that I started my YouTube channel, but I started doing that, and that kind of the YouTube tarot landscape wasn't as big as it would be like 2 years later at that point. So there wasn't much happening really, and I wasn't really that engaged with it. But I was working and experimenting, and then kind of the boom of YouTube kind of happened, and like Kelly Fitzgerald's live chats came along, and through that, like, I met a lot of friends, a lot of pals, a lot of folks who were sort of feeling the way that I was, and that's when I started really making videos in earnest, and that's when I started exploring like working with non Rider Waite Smith decks, and sort of challenging what I know now but I didn't know then, was that I was understanding how I wasn't connecting with tarot anymore because I was asking it to do things that I didn't care about,
Okay.
which was all the esoteric kind of things. And because Lenormand was having such a moment then too, there was all this dialogue about, oh, Lenormand's so practical and precise, where tarot's so mushy and spiritual and imprecise. And I didn't feel drawn to Lenormand, but I did feel like tarot can tarot can do those things. We just don't ask it to. And so that was when I started working towards like writing tarot on earth, or kind of doing what led to that. And that was when I started feeling more confident. It was like around writing that book, and writing that made me understand my own kind of viewpoints, my own methods, and what I wanted out of a reading, right? And what I wanted to be able to give from a reading. And that, sorry, the air's a little dry in here. Uh, but that's kind of when I started. So, I mean, I was in my 30s at that point. So
Okay, so about
yeah,
10 years or so after you started.
roughly, yeah.
Now, one thing that I've also noticed is you have such a wide breadth of knowledge when it comes to all different types of tarot. Um, so are you drawn, because I know at the beginning you started with Rider-Waite-Smith, but are you particularly drawn to any system, or are you just pretty open to whatever you're called to do?
That's it. I'm really open to it. I think I like hesitated exploring with non-Waite Smith stuff for a long time because I thought, oh God, I'm gonna have to start all over again. But what I didn't realize was you carry everything you know with you already. You know what I mean? So you're not restarting, you're just adding to. And so like for me, moving from Waite Smith to more like pip based decks, I worked with the Wild Unknown like almost exclusively for roughly a year, and that was kind of my transition. And at first I started just applying the Waite Smith meanings to those cards as I remembered them. Um Over time I said, well, I don't have to do that, right? Because this is a different thing. And that was when I got into like the elements and the numbers and started understanding how to read that way. And then that transitioned me into sort of working with even more pip based stuff. And and that taught me to not close myself to trying different things and saying, oh, I like this from Lenormand, but I'm not there yet with that system, but let me take that from there. So like a lot of the spreads I use came from Lenormand, and so I was sort of combining things and the way that, you know, in Lenormand, like the star card sometimes represents your compass, your direction. I was like, oh, there, that takes a card in tarot that I've never really understood, and redesigns it for me, right? Reinterprets it. So I was suddenly in this space of like, if I expose myself to as much kinds of divination as possible and apply different interesting things to tarot, then I deepen my tarot practice and get myself closer to where I want to be. Um, and that is, to me, like, that's how you go from like being a reciter to a reader, is when you kind of internalize systems and you internalize the cards and you experiment and play, and you're like not threatened by other methods, and you know what I mean. And you just feel a sense of openness to what's about to happen when you lay out the cards. And getting to that point was when my confidence started to sort of kick in, and I stopped feeling like the imposter syndrome.
One of the things, one of the first videos I saw of yours was, can't remember the title of it. It had to deal with beginner decks and beginner tips.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most intriguing things that you said, that I haven't heard from anybody else, is that there are no beginner tarot decks.
Mm-hmm.
If you find a deck that you resonate with, you can use it.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that the I think that we get, well, one of the things that we do is we like apply training wheels to things, as though, you know what I mean, as though that like makes it safer. And somehow like the idea that the Waite Smith is a beginner deck, or it's, you know, descendants or beginner, and like the Thoth isn't, is 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 kind of arbitrary. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Crowley's book on the Thoth deck is very convoluted, but so is Waite's deck on the Waite Smith deck. It's because it's got pictures on it, but the Crowley deck has keywords on it. You know what I mean? So it's not. I think we get so, as novices, or when we're starting something new, we get so concerned about doing it right, that we miss out on the chance to say, well, this, you know, I know so many people who picked up the Waite Smith deck and hated it and said, I can't do this, right? And it wasn't until 20 or, you know, 10 years later where they picked up something else and realized there are other decks. So it's not, you know, it's not about what's for a beginner. It's about what serves as a good trigger for your intuition.
Oh,
You know,
I love that.
and that's kind
Yeah,
of what I think about.
yeah, I fell into that, like beginner decks. I started with Rider-Waite-Smith, and I wanted a basic Rider-Waite-Smith, because in my mind, if that I like the images because
Yeah.
I felt that it made it easier. You mentioned that you think it's actually more challenging to learn that deck compared to, let's say, a pip deck,
Hmm.
because there's a storyline within each card. And also, I figured if this was what originated, these images were the original images.
Hmm.
I learned this, that would be a good foundation to others, like the Spacious Tarot, that doesn't have
Hmm.
people in it. Because when I first saw the Spacious Tarot, I was so confused,
Yeah.
did not understand it. But now looking at it, I can see because my
Hmm.
brain fills in, the image
Yeah.
that makes sense to me.
Yeah. The brain is really amazing. And when we like allow it to stop telling us we're terrible, and when we let it do what it's good at, it does amazing things. You know what I mean? But we're so conditioned to tell ourselves, no, we're bad. No, this doesn't work. No, you'll never be good. Or many of us are anyway, that we can't let the brain do what it's there to do, you know? So we're constantly protecting ourselves from ourselves and then limiting what we can actually achieve, which isn't our fault. You know, it's the.
Yeah, I'm confident in a lot of different areas of my life, but I am pretty insecure when it comes to doing a reading. I've done some readings for other tarot readers, like we've sought, and I'm always nervous about what they're going to say.
Hmm.
And so this is how my brain works. They give me some really positive feedback and they give examples as to why they liked my reading.
Yeah.
And my brain goes, oh my God, I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
Or no, they're just being really nice.
Right.
They're just being nice so I don't like feel bad about the reading. And
Right.
they're going to hang up or we're going to disconnect and, they're just going to think I'm useless.
Yep. I know that feeling well.
Um, so how long was it after you had your first deck that you started doing tarot readings for others? And what was that like?
It was, it was interesting. I am very I think of myself as so afraid of everything and anxious all the time, but there are some things where I'm like, it was pretty quick. I would say within a year, I had signed up to read on the free networks for the ATA and kind of dove in. You know what I mean? They weren't necessarily great readings, but it wasn't that I wasn't giving good answers; is that I was showing off.
Uh,
And you do that when you're young and you want to be impressive, you know. So that was my thing was, I would write these long ass readings and my mentor, you always had a mentor on those. And she would say like, you know, these are too long. Like no one's going to read this. They want an answer. I'm like, no, it's great. Look how brilliant this writing is. Look how, I've summed up all this magical wisdom, you know what I mean? And she'd be like, no one cares. And I would get really hurt by that. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until I got older that I was like, yeah, no one cares. People just want the answer. I just want the
it's
answer.
interesting. I've done both, like in person and where I write out. We do like a mail swap.
Yeah.
My written ones are long,
Yeah.
but the ones that I do in person are very concise.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm like, is this too short?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, is this a reading? Because it's so short. I've gotten better about associating cards together, like the cards that are next,
Yeah.
cards that, how the third card relates to the first card. So that I'm starting to get into that place where I'm starting to get somewhat comfortable
Yeah.
using the elements like this has a lot of energy with emotion, or this spread, like there's a lot of overthinking, it's a bit
Yeah.
but I find that interesting. Do you find that written and verbal are different lengths for you?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
my verbal readings are very quick. I don't understand how readers like fill an hour. Um
I
I
know.
really do. I can do 3 readings in about 20 minutes, which when I'm at like a fair is advantageous, right? Because I have 15 minutes. I'm going to sit with you, answer every question you've got, and be on to the next. So I'm really lucky. A written reading is longer, much longer. But what I've started doing is writing out the reading and then writing a summary, putting it at the top, and then saying, if you want to know how I got there, here's what
Oh, I really like that.
yeah,
I think that's great. That's a good tip for a lot of people. Yeah, I don't know. Like people charge 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, and I
yeah,
do think I'm thinking one of the ways they do it is they continue the client has another question, so they
mhm,
have another card,
yeah.
and maybe fill it out that way.
And then the readers who have like a more conversational style, you know, where even the client is doing some of the interpretation. I don't do that as much just because it's not how I learned.
And what was the most difficult part for you when it came to learning the tarot?
Ooh, it was my ego. It was my insecurity. It was getting out of my own way and the like imposter syndrome stuff. And it was really that. It was like um just the like I'm not good, you know, I'm not good enough. And this was happening to me well into my 30s, you know what I mean, even after I had started feeling confident. And I talk about this story occasionally. I was the first time I went to the Reader Studio conference in New York. They pair you with someone at the very beginning and you do a reading for each other. And I melted down. I mean, I didn't melt down, but I completely fuzzed out. I just couldn't do it. I was in a room with all these famous people and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And the first time I registered to go to it, I didn't go. Like I paid for it and then chickened out at the last minute. So like the second time I was there and then like dudded out in my first thing. Um, you know, and getting over that was the biggest obstacle for me because and I made a video about this recently too. It's like being a reader is a very delicate balance of humility and confidence, and I just didn't have the confidence.
It just did come out.
Yeah,
The title also had ego, I think.
yeah,
That just came out. Yeah.
yeah. Last week, early last week, I think. Yeah.
Now, what inspired you to start a tarot tube? Because you started 12 years, your first video I when I looked is 12 years ago.
Yeah,
The tarot tube.
there wasn't.
Are you who was before you? Because I don't even like you're the person who has the oldest video that I've seen.
I don't know who was making videos before me. I would imagine like Kellyanne Maddox might have been, and I think
Oh, okay.
um uh I can't remember her name. There was a Canadian woman named like the tarotgirl.com or something like that I think I remember seeing. So there were a couple but there weren't a lot, and there I didn't get any engagement on those early videos, and I stopped probably after like 10 or 11 for a couple of years, you know, until things started sort of cooking up again. And then I remember like Donale de la Rosa's videos, Kelly Fitzgerald.
Oh, Kelly. I love Kelly.
Yeah. I mean, there was so many, suddenly there was like, it was like the moment happened and there was, in a weird way, this sort of golden age of Tarot Tube, you know, where everyone was getting along and it all seemed so promising. But as things usually happen, that dissolves and changes and evolves. And YouTube is not as active as it used to be either, sadly.
What inspired you to come up with or to start the tarot channel?
I was looking for video demos. Like I wanted to hear how other people read and I wanted to learn from that because I'd never gotten a real good reading. Like I'd gotten readings from other like free reading network people and they never really connected. So at a certain part I said, does this even work? And there was none out there. So I said, well, maybe I'll just do some and it'll help somebody else, you know, and I just it was really valuable because in describing what I was doing, it helped me understand why I was doing what I was doing, and it helped me understand whether or not it was effective. So it's actually really valuable. Like if people want to start a YouTube channel and they're like, well, I don't have enough experience, I don't have enough to show, like don't even worry about that. Just like do videos of you doing readings and people are going to love them because people love hearing other readers read, so we can steal from each other, so we can hear interpretations that we've never thought of, and so we can hear how different people flow with the cards. So like that was what I needed back then. There wasn't much out there, so I made a couple, and that sort of, you know, set me down the path.
I think we have something similar in the way we started tarot because for me, I went to tarot and I was brand new. I didn't know anything about tarot. So I was trying to find somebody who was brand new and showing how they were learning tarot.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find that.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, then I'll do it.
Yeah.
So my journey has been like, watch me learn how I'm learning tarot.
Yeah.
And it's grown from there. I've done classes and done reviews on classes. I've done
Mm-hmm.
journals. And then I started doing these chats, you know, to learn how people, you know, are getting their journey through tarot. And the one that I've found the most helpful has been my tarot one card study. Have you seen any of those?
No, yeah, no, that sounds cool though.
So what I'm doing is I'm having 78 people come on my channel
Mm.
and we go over a card.
Oh, I love that.
And so I've already done all the majors, the pentacles are next. And it forces me to study that card because I have it in front of me. They talk about their interpretation of it. I talk about my interpretation of it. And I have found that to be very enlightening and
Yeah.
a lot because people have some really interesting perceptions. Like there's this one woman, can't remember her name right off the bat, where we were talking about the chariot. And she came up that for her, the chariot, for a person there, the charioteer is actually her mind. And I
Mm.
was like, wow, the
Yeah.
mind is. I thought that blew my mind.
Yeah.
These golden nuggets that have really added to my knowledge.
I love that's such a great idea. And those things that people say just offhanded, can be mind bending. Someone, Justin Michael on YouTube, told me once that the tower was thought to actually not be about the tower but the lightning originally, because we have this series of lights from the tower, the star, the moon, the sun. And I thought, whoa, that's brilliant, and that comes up in readings now sometimes. So
See the lightning as the catalyst
mhm.
being. So
Yeah. And it's a card I often associate with electricity and electronics
yeah,
because of
interesting.
that. Yeah.
And so how do you how what's changed like from when you first started tarot, because it's
Hmm.
been 12 years,
Yeah.
like the kind of videos that you used to make compared to the videos that you've, let's say, made in the last year or two? Has there been a transformation for you?
Yeah. Yeah, there has. I mean, some of the videos I make these days, I make just to keep the channel current because I don't have as much to say as I used to, partly because I've written, and I'm writing a lot. Um, so like I never wanted to do deck reviews. Not I loved watching them, but I just didn't want to do them. But I kind of started doing those to just get views, and for a while those were getting more views than the like tutorial videos. That switched, and I think partly because maybe more folks know a little bit more about me now
Mhm.
back then. And I don't make as many videos as I used to. I started overcomplicating my video process too. During like I did the Majors on Earth series, and like around that time, I think it was during lockdown if I'm not mistaken, and I was watching a lot of tech vloggers, and they always have like this amazing production quality. So I like bought like a camera, and I started buying lights and like trying to get like the right bokeh effect behind. And I was like, it just became so difficult to make a video that I didn't want to make them anymore. So like I got rid of a lot of that. And now I wish I made them more regularly, but I'm older now. I'm tired a lot of the time.
I
I
can
have a
relate.
day job, and it's not I'm not like I'm really enjoying writing about tarot right now. So a lot of what I would normally have put in a video are going into the books, and so that's part of it too. Is I always wanted to do a tarot blog, but YouTube was sort of getting big at that point, and I felt like no one was going to read a blog. So I started making YouTube videos. That's kind of how that happened. And now that like I've got a book coming out and I'm working on another one. And I'm not, so I've transitioned away from my other writing life, which was writing for the theater. And so now I have more writing time, and I'm really just having so much fun just crawling into tarot in this way that I've never been able to before. And so that's another thing is like, I do wish I had more energy to make videos, and the kinds of videos that I did doing the Majors on Earth, because I really enjoyed editing those. Like that part was fun, but the like getting all the lights, camera, and action beforehand wasn't. So
When I first started, I bought I did all this. I go crazy.
yeah.
Research, what
Mm-hmm.
camera, lighting, stands. Like I did all this thing and I bought me this contraption because it had to be perfect before I
Yep.
did my first video. So my first video, frankly, was shit.
Mm-hmm.
But even today, I get a little flustered because my skin color isn't always the same. And, the light in the back will go
Yeah.
off out of nowhere. And when I first started, it would stress me out, but I'm a
Yeah.
little bit more relaxed than I used to be. Now, did Tarot Tube change or affect your tarot practice at all?
It did. Yeah, it did. It gave me a community, that wasn't there before. And I had people to, I had people to complain with. I had people to commiserate with, to share ideas with. And I was, I was learning from everybody, and I was getting excited by things. And I was getting excited by decks. I mean, we did, I think, collectively create sort of like an overly consumeristic,
Mhm.
hunger slash thirst back then, but I think it was out of excitement, and it was like indie decks really started cooking at that point. You know what I mean? Like, we started getting these sexy indie decks that couldn't have been made before. You know what I mean? The first indie deck I ever got was printed on like index card material, and it didn't last a year. Then like 2020, I don't know, 2012, 13, 14, like the Wild Unknown came out, the Fountain came out, and like the production quality was like better than what the mass market was giving us. And so we were greedy, and we were, sharing a lot and spending a lot, but it was just like, I think, a collective like joy in how much beautiful tarot deck was out there at the time. And so, I do sometimes, and that's one reason why I never wanted to do reviews, but it was fun. It was exciting. And it was exciting to hear different people's takes on the same decks.
That's one of the reasons I like watching walkthroughs.
Yeah.
People will talk about the card and compare it to the Rider-Waite Smith, or they'll just talk about it in general and talk about their understanding or what they like about the card. And I learned through that. That really helped me.
Yeah.
The danger in doing those for me was all of a sudden I had to have that deck.
Oh, yeah.
And my first year, I bought way too many decks that I could ever use. My purchase has reduced significantly, but I still think I bought way too many. Now
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
trying to buy decks that really call to me, that I really want, that I feel
Yeah.
I'll use, which means I ended up purchasing a lot of out of print decks.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened to call
Yeah.
um, when it comes to other tarot tubers, are there any that really stand out for you that you keep going back to?
I haven't been watching as much tarot content in the last few years. So, um, there are my pals, that I always watch. And people will send me stuff, and I am purposely not naming names because I don't want anyone to feel like, oh yay or oh boo, he doesn't watch me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I want everybody is welcome at my table as long as they're not an asshole. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't take the fact that I didn't see your video as a sign that it's not good. It's just that I have a very limited attention span and I'm very tired. So, so Instagram is more where I'm sort of active in terms of like connecting and communing with folks lately, because it's a little less overwhelming than like a 20-minute video. But I miss consuming that much content. So I think there will come a point where I'm going to swing back and start watching more. And I again really believe in learning from other readers, which is one reason why I don't record and sell my classes so people can watch them later, is because they're so participatory that they belong as much to the students as to me. And so I don't think it's fair for me to put that content out there. You know what I mean? But I do it that way because it's more interesting. But also I end up learning a lot from the folks who take my workshops, which is why I don't like to call them students and why I don't like to call myself a teacher. But there are like, I'm really a fan of Maria Minnis's book, the Tarot for the Hard Work, Lane Smith's book, 78 Acts of Liberation, I think is the name of it. So there are like friends I have who are writing now books that are more political and kind of edgier, and that's where I've been consuming most of my content lately. But I've also been on a spiritual journey, sort of exterior of tarot, and so a lot of my consumption too has been more like spiritual, witchier kinds of content lately.
Okay. Are there things on TarotTube that you just will not share?
You mean like in terms of my own practice, or?
It's like, for a long time, I didn't share that I was a therapist. I mean,
Mm.
because I was concerned that people would take what I would say as like
Hmm.
gospel. Well, Benny should know because he's a therapist, and so
Right.
that way. And so, now, so being gay, that was another one that I wasn't
Yeah.
very comfortable with at the beginning,
Hmm.
even though I'm very open in my real life. It took time for me to be
Yeah.
open.
Yeah, I'm pretty open about most things. I think in some cases I've been too open about myself. I learned the hard way, that when you put yourself out on social media and you develop even a little bit of an audience, something happens where you stop being you and
Mhm.
you start being who people think you are, and you don't know that until it's too late in some cases, you know what I mean? And so there have been a couple times in my life where I sort of misunderstood my relationship with someone I thought was a friend who sort of looked at me differently, or someone, I didn't think was a friend who was out there defending me, you know what I mean? So that has made me cagier about allowing like personal relationships to develop, beyond like kind of the work kind of friendship, you know what I mean? Like it's rare that someone will get as close to me as to like know my partner's name, for example.
Okay.
You know, um that was not always the case. And I've had one or two really sort of devastating moments as a result of that. But I learned, again, that the parasocial relationship is not the same as a friendship, you know what I mean? And I learned the hard way, but I learned, and now I'm older and wiser. So I'm less I share a lot about my life because I want people who struggle with mental health, depression, self-confidence. I want them to understand that they're not alone in that. And, just because I sort of put myself out in the world as a teacher doesn't mean I'm thriving. You know what I mean? I have dark moments too, but I'm less likely to sort of allow like a closeness than I used to be, I guess, if that makes sense.
It
I'm
just
more
makes sense.
protective of my heart, I guess.
I'm pretty open in my life, and I would question myself like, why am I so open in my life, but I'm struggling online?
Yeah.
It's just the fear, because people tend to be more honest and open and
Hmm.
tend to criticize more freely online,
Yeah.
and that gave me some trepidation. But for a weird reason, I was always wondering like, what if somebody in my life sees this and
Hmm.
they didn't know that about me?
Yeah.
And then I remembered when I was very young, I got discharged from the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Hmm.
And I remember driving off base telling myself I would never, ever hide ever again.
Yeah.
And that kind of opened the door for me again to kind of get reestablished with being my authentic self.
Yeah.
Well, now, I want to talk about tarot decks.
Okay.
One thing is, I see your collection. How many decks do you have?
I don't know, but it's over 300.
Over 300. Yeah, Don Michelle, Lisa Papez,
Hmm.
they have hundreds of decks as well.
Yeah.
I have maybe 100. And I'm like, I think that's too many for me
Yeah.
because I'll never get to, and I love them. They're like, I always say this, they're like little museums, and boxes. I am just fascinated how artists depict these images in just so many different ways that I think are just outstanding. But I find that I can't use all the decks that I want.
Yeah.
So I went through this cycle where I'd use a deck for 3 days and I'd go to another one. In three
Yeah.
days, I'd go to another one. But I found that that was really counterproductive because then I never really got to know the deck. Therefore, I wasn't really getting a really strong base of the tarot overall.
Hmm.
So, how do you manage working with all these decks, or do you collect some, or they're just like how does this collection work for you?
So that's a great question. It's changed over the years. I think there are some that move through my life pretty quickly. You know what I mean? I'll get it, not like it, give it away. And when I go to conferences, there's usually like a swap table. I went to one this April. I think I brought 3 bags of decks and books with me. I left with nothing. Like they all went. And I'm trying to sort of figure out a way to create something like that locally because I know other readers in the same boat I am. Some I hold on to for the exact reason you just said. Like they're maybe not a deck that I read with, but they're like a little museum, and there's something beautiful about them, and I enjoy that they're present in my life in the way that I enjoy having a copy of a book that I've loved and may never look at again, but knowing that it's on my shelf
Yeah.
makes me feel safe. You know what I mean? Like The Little Prince is a book like that, right? I'll probably never read it again, but it was such an important book to me when I was young, and it's always there, and I love knowing that. Then there are others where I think this isn't for me, and then 15 years goes by, and suddenly it's the only deck I'm working with. So when a deck's like, don't get rid of me quite yet, I try to hold on to it. You know, if I have any doubts, I'll keep it, because I never know whether it might want to mess around at some point. You know what I mean? And they do, and that was the thought deck this summer. I've had that deck since I started reading. I've never worked with it. Spent the entire summer working with it. I'm still working with it.
Now, do you find that, because you said this earlier, you used Wild Unknown for a whole year?
Yeah.
Find yourself like picking up a deck and you solely work with that deck for a specific amount of time?
It
Or
does happen. Yeah.
you don't like change decks out regularly?
I go through phases like that too. It's interesting. The last year, last October 2023, one thing I do when I'm teaching classes is I tell the folks in the class, like, don't ever throw anything that you hate away, right? Like, at least wrestle with why you don't like it, because there's probably a lesson somewhere in there for you. It doesn't mean you have to use it, doesn't mean you'll ever love it, but it might mean that there's something there for you to learn. And I had been finishing telling a class that, and then was bitching about how I hate keywords on tarot cards, and never work with them. And I thought, well, I should probably take my own advice. And so I did. And so I went through all my decks with keywords, and I narrowed it down to one deck that I was going to use. And then I went and bought another deck that had keywords that I'd always liked, but didn't get because of that. And I worked with just those two decks for about 3 months.
Wow.
And I loved it. It was revolutionary. It was a great experiment. It changed the way I read. It changed the way I think about keywords on cards. It changed my own perception of my own biases, right? So that extended, and I think I worked with those two decks probably for about 6 months. And then I got the idea to say, well, that was successful. What's another thing I hate? And I said, Aleister Crowley. So that was how so I give myself assignments sometimes to push myself out of my biases. It doesn't always work. You know what I mean? Like, there are some decks that I've wanted to work with and they just don't sing, you know, and I don't know why. I think everybody has that. But
are you familiar with the Lomanco Tarot?
Yes, I love that deck.
Okay, so what you were saying, the Lomanco did that for me. I was so disturbed, and I think that's a perfect word for me, with the Lover's card and the card. I could not get past it. And so it went out of print.
Yeah.
Right after I looked at it and almost bought it. And it just, that ruminated my mind, like, why do I hate those cards so much? And for me, those cards were really grounded in like sex. And it was very unsettling.
Yeah.
And so I have these issues when it comes to sex, you know, or being naked, like even to the point where I just don't take my shirt off in front of people. I just don't do it. It's just, and so I was like, okay, I want the deck now because I'm supposed to work with this deck to get cards. So when I need to get vulnerable, when I need to face, like, you know, intimate relationships or something that makes me uncomfortable when it comes to the human body, that's the deck I'll use.
I love that.
And I have found it very interesting. I have found it very uncomfortable, sometimes insightful, but it's not a deck that is cozy for me.
Yeah. No, it's not a cozy deck. I love that deck, and I didn't have that reaction to it, but I took it to an event, and I was like, I'm reading with this deck, and everybody was like, whoa, this deck is intense. And so now I don't bring it to events anymore. But I was like, hey, this is great. Look at all these naked queer people. You know what I mean? Like,
beautiful deck.
It's gorgeous.
Love the coloring, the style. It's an amazing. What is Do you have like a favorite deck? This is my favorite deck.
I do. I have the Tarocchi, Corte de Tarocchi, which
Never heard of it.
it's an Italian deck from Il Meneghello. It's a very strange pip deck, and I have a lot of it. It's actually the deck that is the picture on my YouTube,
Yes, yes, yes.
and it's very strange. I just love it. I don't work with it too much because, as you can see, it's very very thick and it's not the easiest shuffle. Although it does have a very satisfying shuffle experience.
What
Um,
what is that? Why is that your favorite deck?
It's I can't describe it. It's there's just something like when I saw it, I fell in love with it, and we've been in a passionate affair ever since. I just took it off the shelf last week because I'd forgotten about it, and it's another reason why there are certain things I don't ever get rid of because it's like you never know when they're gonna lure you back with their siren song.
Yeah, my favorite deck is the Spoiler Tarot. I
Mm,
also can't tell you like exactly why.
yeah.
It's so very different from a Rider-Waite-Smith. I love the images. I love the
Mm,
coloring. There are many cards that are my favorite cards in it. Like
mm,
the Devil card in that deck is just amazing. It's
mm,
black with the most of the cards black with a white outline of a devil eating a human being.
mm.
Very out there,
I
but
have to look up it. I'd actually never seen that deck. I know people love it, but I've never seen it.
it resonates with me quite a bit. Oh, and just so you know, the Labanco, because I have a back of the Labanco, uh, and I don't know why I got it because it is so difficult, but it's a collage deck that I really am drawn to.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, they're very. Oh, okay. Here's the devil card. I love this
Oh
card. It's
yeah.
very simple,
Yeah.
but it carries the message, and I think it's very visceral for me.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
Devils are often my favorite. I love the devil.
4 coins.
Oh, beautiful. I can't believe I've never seen this. I've heard people I think because I knew it's out of print and I know people love it that I never went and looked for it.
I will tell you, this is my opinion. The cardstock is shit. I hate it.
Hmm.
Because it's very like this deck is so thick. I can't shuffle it. It's thick.
Hmm. Oh yeah, that is really thick.
So I have to shuffle it in parts.
Hmm.
And then if you riffle shuffle it too hard, you'll bend the card in
Mm. Oh,
no.
that's crappy.
But the use of color, the use of color is phenomenal.
Mm. Ooh, I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
color for me is one of the most important things in a tarot.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that for you? This is the last one I'll show you. This is one of my favorite.
Oh, it's stunning. Collage decks, I used to have a real bias against, but some of them are absolutely primo, and we're very lucky. And I think collage is like the most democratic way to make a deck, right? It's like the most because everyone can do it. Are there things like that? Yeah, there are. Color does, like color palette does. I like
Yeah.
rich colors. I don't like sort of pastel desaturated palettes. There are some decks that I really love and they're somewhat desaturated, and I just feel a little not uninspired by them, but I just feel a little like disappointed that they're not more colorful. So color matters to me, although there are some black and white decks that I really do love, like the Wild Unknown. It there are cards that need to be successful for me, or the deck won't work. The Devil is one of them. Death is one of them. Um, I have very strong feelings about those two cards, specifically the Devil. So, like, if the Devil is too kind of Christianized or too focused on like the addiction aspect of it, I
Mhm.
don't like it because that's also a card. That's a card that I primarily read sexually, particularly in certain combinations. Because I think of the Devil as kind of all those parts of ourselves that get tamped down by Christianity in society, right?
Okay. Yeah, the
Um,
devil card for me is like deals with the mind, like an obsession
mhm.
that you can break from,
Yeah,
but an obsession is very overwhelming and
yeah,
difficult to break from.
yep.
So uh, I will say that for me, I only have one card that has to resonate with me. It can ruin a deck. Is the Five of Pentacles.
Mm.
I find that to be a very personal
Hmm.
card. It reminds me of my childhood
Mm,
and the challenges because I see my mother and myself in it.
mm-hmm.
And, I always struggled,
Yeah.
but my mom always had the church and there was always hope. And so I see that the hope within the card.
Yeah.
But the only way to get to the other side is by taking that step forward.
That's the thing.
So
Yeah.
that's a very important card
That's a
for
beautiful example of how you have to understand the card in life. You know what I
me.
mean? The cards are not ideas. The cards are not archetypes. They're experiences. They're metaphors that describe what you just described, right? And I think as learners, when we're studying tarot, it's where have I felt this card in my life? Not even like a literal image necessarily, but where I felt the vibe of this card in my life. And what you just described is exactly it. And I'm sure when you find that card in a reading, it always has a very potent energy in the spread.
Yeah. The full card does that for me as well. When I joined the Marine Corps at
Mm,
8.
mm,
And I remember stepping off the bus when we were on base and all this chaos going on,
mm.
and me thinking, what did I just
Yeah.
walk into? Like, and I remember the yellow feet. And so when I think, like, if I ever created a deck, I think of that moment of walking off the bus because that's
Mm,
like an off point.
mm.
And so I love that being able to associate them with real life actually helps with learning the card.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the moment that foot hits the ground off that bus, everything's different.
Yes.
Nothing, there's no going back. It's a great, that's it. That's reading, and then we just take that and then apply it to a situation that, where clients in your life, have you had a moment where the second your foot hits the ground, nothing will be the same? You know what I mean? And it's just kind of building narrative and connecting narrative to what's going on with you or with whoever you're reading for. And that's it. It's it right there.
Now, do you have a limit on how much you're willing to spend on a deck, or you're willing to spend what you need to get a deck that really resonates with you?
I do. I've never spent, like, I think the most expensive deck that I ever purchased was the Grand Tarot Beline, which is a French pip kind of Marseille weird deck that I've always wanted. And you can't really get it here unless it's on eBay, and it's like $120, or it was when I got it. And someone had posted a picture of it, and I said, I've always wanted that deck, but it's so expensive. And she said, Ben, it's not getting any cheaper.
Yeah.
And so I gave it to myself as a gift when I graduated from grad school. I don't love to spend a lot of money. If it's an independent deck and I really feel passionately about it, I will. But I don't think I'd ever spend more than that. I've sold decks for crazy amounts that have blown my mind, but I was never the keeper of the receipt of that, because when I did that, I usually did it to donate to an organization.
I've been very fortunate with the out of print decks that I got to have gotten this so inexpensively.
Mm,
Like the spoiler tarot,
hmm.
those can be over $1,000.
Yeah.
I got one for $200 and one for $300.
Yeah.
I was fine with paying with that because I love that deck.
Hmm.
It was worth every penny for me. But I do know that for a lot of people, that's just not feasible.
Right.
And so it'd be nice if some of these decks would go mass market.
The
Um,
Lubunko that has been picked up.
yes, and Bone, Stone, and Earth, which is my most recent acquisition, is going to go up mass market.
Oh, is
But
it?
yes, but I wanted it. Um, And I also wanted the big, thick book that went
Uh-huh.
with it, which is not going to happen in that mass market one.
Right. I
Excuse me.
think I would have paid. I think I would have paid a lot for the Robert M. Place Vampire Tarot.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. You can still get that for like $200 or
yeah,
less.
and it was actually gifted to me, so I
Oh, good.
very, very lucky on that, and I quite love that deck too. I wish
Um,
they would bring that out again, but he doesn't own the copyright, so.
oh. Now, do you have any decks that you've purchased that you regret buying that you spent what you would consider a significant amount of money on?
Um, I honestly can't think of one. No, I think if I had spent that much money, I think I would know that I
Okay.
wanted it. There were some that I really had high hopes for that were like mass market, and then I got them and I was like, this isn't quite as exciting as I thought it would be. But no, I don't think I've ever regretted a big tarot purchase. I'm pretty lucky that way.
I've been disappointed with one deck that it was a big purchase, but I'm gonna get rid of it because I, it's like a collector's item for me.
Yeah.
And maybe eventually, maybe there'll be something that I really want
Yep.
I can trade for.
Yes. I do have a few investment decks, I call them.
Yeah. Now, have you ever done this? I've done this. An indie deck that you know is going to go out of print.
Yep.
Doesn't resonate with you, but you bought it because you know it. People want it, and they paid for it.
Yep. I've got a few.
I did that. I traded 2 decks for the Fairy Tale Tarot from Baba Studio.
Those Baba decks, get them when they're hot.
Let me tell you, I got to share. I literally finished my collection of all the Baba Studios like 3 months ago. The last one I needed was the Bohemian Cat Tarot. I was able to get that.
That's great.
Now I got them on. That was really exciting for me.
Their cardstock is so fun to shuffle.
Do you have most of them or all of them?
I don't. I have the one that I don't have that I wish I did is it's not the fairy tale one, but it's like there's that artist who drew those like animal people, like the phantasmagoric tarot.
The Fantastic Menagerie Tarot.
That one I have.
Or the Mythical Creatures Tarot.
Oh no, the Fantastic Menagerie is the one I want. Mythical Creatures is the one I have.
Okay.
So I've got that. I've got the Victorian Romantic and the Bohemian Gothic. And someone recently gave me the Tarot of Prague.
Oh, that's nice. Nice. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to get a lot of those, but all of a sudden they were reprinting them.
Yeah.
So I got them on. I got backup copies because I know that they're not going to be producing them any longer.
Yeah.
So I know several years from now people are going to want them. So those are some decks.
I got the new edition of the Bohemian Gothic in the wooden box for that reason.
Yeah, I got them right here.
Yeah. I figured I could.
The standard and then the huge one I'll probably never use.
Yeah. But it's like retirement money.
Really. Now, do you have a deck that you just literally you bought and you're like, nope, can't work with it, no way?
There's a bunch. It happens a lot because I impulse buy a lot. And I can't think of like anything that's super famous. There have been some, and actually there's some that I did reviews of that I somewhat regret because I kind of took out my frustration on the whole industry on that deck. You know what I mean? The new Vampire Tarot from Llewellyn was one of those. Like I didn't really like the deck. It's not for me, but it's not the fault of the deck. It was just me venting about the publishing industry, you know, and kind of the homogeneity of what I'm seeing out there. So there are things that I got and didn't like, but wish I hadn't kind of publicized my dislike of it. And some things I've never released, you know, some videos I made about decks that I just never even put out there. Others I did. And like, I felt like things needed to be said, but it wasn't really the fault of the deck. So it's tough because it comes down to taste, but usually where I fall to deck is that there's no attempt to depict queerness. There's no attempt to depict people of color. There's no attempt to depict ability. You know what I mean? It's just, you know, and I'm not saying every deck needs to represent the entire world. You know, I just got a deck that's really pretty that is based on Slavic folk tales. And so it does feature predominantly Slavic people, right? It's going to, but that's sort of where I fall down a lot. But I'm also now not buying as many mass market decks because I'm just not liking what I'm seeing. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, I got the Savvy Tarot. I love it because there's so much representation. You know, there's there's both genders, people of color, young, old, middle age, different types of jobs that people hold. You know, you have people of low economic status to high economic status. So they did a really, really great job with that deck. Are you partial to any style of tarot deck?
I love neutral decks, by which I mean I don't like the images on the cards to give away too much of a mood. mostly for the client's sake when I'm reading for other people. I don't want them to jump to any conclusions
Mm.
psychologically that will make them too anxious to hear what I'm saying. So, and that's why I don't use like the Lubaco Tower, right? Because everyone had such a strong gut reaction to it. So I like decks to be fairly neutral in tone. I don't mean that they shouldn't have decoration or even like artwork or like scenes, but that the scenes are sort of nebulous and like open to interpretation because it allows me to pull on everything I know about that card throughout my career as a reader, not just what I'm seeing on that particular piece of art. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that leads me to a question I don't think I've asked anybody before is do you have decks that go based on the subject matter, so like work, relationships,
Ah,
that you use for other people?
no, I don't. I just use whatever deck I'm sort of vibing with at that moment. I don't have decks don't really give personalities to me the way that they do to a lot of other readers. So, I won't sort of choose the Victorian romantic for love, for example. I just work with whatever I'm working with. The only time I really will consider that is sometimes a client will say, will you use a Waite Smith deck because I'm learning and I want to see see you work with those cards, right? So in that case, I'll pick something that is Waite Smith based, but I don't decks don't have personalities in that way to me.
Okay. Do you use Oracle decks at all?
Not really. I have there are a few that I think are really cool um that I enjoy, but I don't work with them much. I don't find them as exciting or as like I don't know, chatty as is. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I love Oracle decks. I started with Oracle decks,
Mm.
led to tarot, and then I don't know, about a year in, all of a sudden something kind of changed, and I really started liking tarot.
Hmm.
But I found that using Oracle decks really helped me develop my intuition when it came
Yeah.
to cards.
It's
That's
a
why
great gateway.
that's what I found to be the greatest benefit of using.
Yeah. And they're not denominational in the way that like tarot has all this esoteric stuff associated with it, right? So you don't have to have any particular belief or you're not going to necessarily encounter the kind of like symbolism in an oracle deck necessarily that you'll see in a tarot. So it's a little bit of like a gentler access point to divination. So in that way, I think it's great. And I think some people are just really attuned to working with them, and that's awesome. It just
Yeah,
doesn't they rarely sing to me the way that tarot does.
I love that sings to me. What we had I had told you that I was going to ask you this. So male representation within the tarot community and tarot cards, because the vast majority of tarot tubers are women. I feel the majority of readers are women.
Mhm.
There are a lot of decks that have strong feminine energy, where even decks that don't have any male representation in them.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it makes sense. There's a few reasons why. I think, first of all, divination has mostly been associated with women in history. Women of color, Romani women, and white ladies too.
Mhm.
And I think the reason for that is that if your life and your economic status depends on who you're going to marry, then you're going to want to ask questions about who am I going to, you're going to want to know what's my marriage prospect look like. You know what I mean? So I think when you think about divination, um, this is where I start to get maybe a little more political than anyone wants me to, but like it's always been a tool for marginalized people, and
Mm.
it's weird to say that like a wealthy white lady in Britain in Victorian era was marginalized, but she was, you know what I mean? Her status was entirely based on who she married. Um, if you don't grow up worrying about that, then you're gonna of course think that divination is silly, right? But if your future depends on finding the right match, and not only will he have enough money, but will he beat me? You know what I mean? Will we have children to carry on? So I think that carries through. I think that groups who are frequently unsafe in
Mhm.
society are more intuitive, right? Because intuition keeps us safe. It's how we sort of know our surroundings are safe.
Yeah, it's a survival
It's
instinct.
exactly it. And so people who experience being unsafe in public are also going to be drawn to divination as well. Um, and I think, of course, there's the connection to like the witchcraft movement of the 60s and 70s, and sort of tarot became really part of that. And so it makes a lot of sense. And you know, there's all then the toxic masculinity stuff around like what you're allowed to believe and what you're allowed to think is cool and what you're allowed to embrace. And I think that's why when you meet men in divination, there's a pretty good chance they're queer in some way,
Yes, yes.
you know. Because again, we're a population who's used to having to rely on our intuition and for whom safety is a concern, you know.
Yeah, well, safety, yeah, definitely. So I never thought about marginalization when it came to tarot, and I think that is spot on. I can clearly see that in me because I also grew up Catholic and seeing how that was extremely oppressive for me, frankly terrorizing, and finding tarot, which was a much safer place
Mm-hmm.
to kind of explore what spirituality looked like for me.
Yeah.
And so that I can see. And then where you were talking about men, because this is where my brain goes. Culturally, men are not really allowed to express their feelings
Mm-hmm.
or their thoughts or tap into anything that's outside of their own control.
Right.
And I think tarot really allows for that. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable to whatever the message is. And just as important, vulnerable to the person in front of you.
Yeah.
Be comfortable with those feelings that come up between you and the cards and then you and the person that you're reading for. It's hard to do a reading and be comfortable in your own skin when the reading is kind of like, oh, I have to say this out loud.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you have to be comfortable with the
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and that's not typical to straight men. I give straight men a hard time. Straight men, I've been closer to a lot of straight men in my life than gay men because of the
Mhm.
innately competitive nature of gay men. But when the occasions where I have a straight male client, a straight cis male client, he is almost always the most grateful person to work with, you know. And to me, I sort of understand why, right? Because that's a person who is allowing themselves to be vulnerable. Getting a reading is vulnerable, you know what I mean? Because this person you don't know could tell you anything, you know, including you're going to be dead in 24 hours, you know what I mean? Not that we do that, but that's what people think. You know, and so I don't want to say that like no straight men do that. It's just that, and I feel terrible that I have to put that caveat in there too. But it's, you know, if you grew up feeling safe and that the world was made for you, you're not probably as intuitive as someone who didn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so if you're a straight nerd who is bullied, you're probably more intuitive than the jock who was kicking your ass, unless that jock happens to be in the closet. You know?
Yeah. So if this is for new tarot readers that are watching this channel, what is suggestions? I know that like the first one that I'm going to ask you, it's anything, but what's the one deck that you would suggest for a new reader, a book that you would suggest, and just one general piece of advice that you would give?
Okay. A deck that I would recommend is the Fifth Spirit Tarot.
Okay.
Probably Claire Burgess. It's modern without feeling like trendy.
Mhm.
Um, it's diverse. Every time I read for clients with that deck, inevitably someone points at a card and says, "Oh my God, that's me." You know what I mean? And I love that. So that deck. Books are harder because it comes down to um connecting with the content. I guess it's easier for me to say what to avoid.
Okay.
Um so I would say avoid anyone who claims to be like the expert.
Ah.
Avoid anything that says this is the only book you'll ever need.
Mhm.
um and avoid the 24-hour way to do, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
um avoid anything that like makes it seem like you can just do it immediately, and look for things that push you, look for things that make you a little uncomfortable, look for things you disagree with even, and spend time with why. And I would say like maybe more than there being a book, begin writing your own book.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm doing with this one card tarot study.
Yeah,
I'm calling it a community tarot guidebook.
I love it.
because it incorporates my new perspective. Because sometimes I'm sharing in the video and I'll say something that I'm like, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
I can't believe that came from me.
Yeah.
It's brand new, and then I incorporate what people say. So
I love that.
I think that's great, writing your
Yeah.
own book. I don't think a lot of people even think about doing that.
It doesn't mean you have, like, we live in a culture where it's like you write something, it has to be published. That's not it. You know what I mean? You can self-publish it, you can publish it if you want to, but it's more about learning. Get your friends together and make them let you give them a 2-hour tarot workshop where you teach them everything you know.
Oh,
When
that's
you
a good way of learning.
Yeah, when you put what you're doing into words, it suddenly becomes part of your muscle. You know what I mean? And it helps you understand it better. So, like, make them do it. They talk about all the movies they love and bore you to tears with, the latest rom-com or whatever. So you're like, great, we talked about that for 2 hours. Let me tell you everything I know about tarot.
Great. So, anything that you wanted to share that I didn't ask that kind of came up in our conversation or before you came on?
I can't think of anything. No, it's fun though. I love talking about this stuff.
Oh my God, me too. These videos are my favorite. Because and I started this particular one because I would watch people, um, but I never got to like kind of know them. I didn't
Yeah.
know how they got to TarotTube and how they know so much. And so I
Mhm.
said, why don't I just talk to them and record it and put it out there
Yeah.
for everybody else so people get to know a little bit more about maybe one of their favorite tarot tubers.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I love the idea of, like, I think because social media has become so celebrity culture based in the same way that, like, the rest of our culture is, like,
Mhm.
anyone who has, like, more than your followers somehow is like a celebrity to you, and then they become untouchable. And, like, I don't like that. I think we're all on the same journey together. You know what I mean? We're all students, so let's not play that hierarchy game. I don't like it.
Do you know Lisa Papez?
Yes, well, I know her videos.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I did this first one, I had these goals for last year. And one of them was to start this series, but also get somebody who was well established in tarot
Hmm.
to come on. So for me, I shot big and I asked Lisa to be my first guest without any hesitation. She's like, yes, not a problem. I
Yep.
had maybe 300 subscribers and I was just so touched. And that kind of made me realize that this is a really supportive community.
Yeah.
And from that, it just opened everything up for me. And I haven't really been hesitant on asking anybody to come on. It's just kind of figuring out established people to come on and then people who only have like maybe 100 subscribers and trying to keep
That's a
that
nice balance. Yeah.
uh,
That's great. It's like, let's uplift each other and share channels that are new. And yeah, we're all heading in the same direction, everybody. So let's take care of each other a little bit.
well, Tom, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I really enjoyed this
My
conversation.
pleasure. Thanks for asking me. I'm so excited to talk.
So everybody, thank you so very much for coming by, and until next time, my name is Benny and I am the Fool's Apprentice. Bye guys.